So on the Flex truck, these taillights are just awful. These little rubber things on the other one were already cracking, and it's never even been outside. Then it has a plug for a light in the back of it that just plugs into like an adapter to a bulb, which is just awful. So we're getting rid of all that mess. It's gonna, instead of having external ground, it'll just wire right into the ground. But this was running right into the fender. These were crazy long. Like, those little guys stuck through these brackets that much. You know, just a ridiculous amount. Because we're just gonna have this wire, it doesn't need this giant hole through the back. So what I want to do is take the wires out the bottom a little more hidden, and then I want to make my own bracket, because these are horribly ugly. Not only are these horribly ugly, they run the lights right into the bumper, so they needed to be taller, which you'd have to, you know, I don't know, quite a bit of monkeying with this to get it right. So what I want to make it out of is the taillight brackets is more of like a 30s 20s kind of look, where it's just a little round bar. And so the first thing I want to do is weld this little round bar to these two bolts, which will space this properly for those bolts to go right into the bed like they're supposed to, like they did on these brackets. So I want to weld these on, this little guy to these two, and then build our bracket off of that, so it looks like one continuous piece of tubing. I'm going to take it to where these don't look like bolts anymore and just look like the piece of tube, not tube, it's round solid bar. And that goes in and comes around here, and the studs for the light, I won't use these guys because they're ridiculously long, but something like that to where it screws in through the back of the light, so you can't, when it's all said and done and put on the truck, you can't see any of the hardware. Instead of seeing all of it and the wiring, I want to see none of that.
All it takes is one job, oh yeah. All it takes is one job, and everything is gonna be okay.
Now, those are welded together. Let's see if I had a little water on them, cool them off. But now we have a base to start with here, and set them up on the other guy. Now this guy will go onto our pillar here, the bracket will come up, and our tail light will be here on the back of the bed. Started doing the body work on this yesterday. Got the outsides of the bed panels ready to prime. I'll probably try to get some primer on there tomorrow. But as I'm working with this, I'm going to be working on these guys here, trying to get our little pieces done. I made up this, well, I just got a piece of tubing and welded this thing to it. That's all I did. So I'm going to heat this up and wrap it around, and that's going to give me my curve that I want on this bar for our tail light project here. So let's make it hot. Past where I want, so I can have choice of where to cut this. You can see I had zero issue with that. This is the back of the tail light, and this is kind of why I chose that diameter to bend it. Is now you can see that covers up those little holes there. So now I can have the studs welded off the back of this piece, put them on, screw them in from the inside, or put a nut on them from the inside, and it just has that nice little contour that goes with the back of the tail light there. Then this guy will come off, go down. I kind of ground on this one a little bit, so it's the same round rod, and that can come off the bottom of there like that. And these two guys go into the bed, bolt in from the back. So when we're done, you won't be able to see any of the screws or bolts that hold it together. I also am going to fill in this hole and do the wiring out the bottom here, because we can do a lot smaller harness out of it. So I understand if you're a little lost at this point with what the heck I'm doing. Here's our piece. Okay, he goes into that. This guy is going to be welded on the end of here, and that is going to hold our tail light right there. There's a lot of, you know, angles that it could be at. It could be in or out or up or down. All right, let's try to weld this on. All right, we got some weld on there. So now we'll try to grind them all nice and clean. So this is kind of a comparison of what we had and where I'm going with it. So you can see the little curved piece I made here, and I got the nuts welded on, or the studs welded on there. What I did to do the studs was I just made a little groove in the back with my little grinder, and then that gave a little depth to that to kind of weld into. And so I cut the heads off the bolts, made a little trough, and welded it in, cleaned it up. And this is kind of what I was going for. You can kind of see the difference here. This big ugly bracket compared to something that's kind of slimmer and cleaner. And we won't have these studs hanging out of the back, and we will not have this big plug hanging out of the back. We will have wiring running into it, but it won't have the ground on the back either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a little hole in here to run the wiring through. We're going to shave this hole off of here, and so it'll just be more like that running into it instead of having all of this mess on here. This was such a big mess, it actually was resting on the fender, and so that would have rubbed through the paint right there. So getting rid of all this is just going to make it a lot neater and tidier, and I think the bracket's okay. I think it's an improvement for sure over, you know, this guy. It has a notch out of it for that wiring harness. We don't need that, and it's ugly. Just to get an idea of the before, that's kind of what we were looking at. And like I said, the fender, you can see the holes for the fender here. The fender comes right here, and so this was hitting there. Welded up the back hole. Got the wiring mocked up. It isn't actually hooked up, but I think that's better. You know, you're still going to see your wiring. That's just the way it is. Could be in a tube. I don't know. I think it's fine. It tucks up so much better than it did factory. It's so much more hidden. I like how the loop turned out. It gives it structure and holds it on there nice. Looks nice. So I think that's a win. A big deal on the outside here is these screws being level going across, and I think we're close. We're in the ballpark, so you know, a little bit of adjustments needed, we can do that, but I think we're close.
All it takes is one job, oh yeah. All it takes is one job, and